Welcome everyone to another AML Gray Matters broadcast. Today is the 12th of July, 2023, and we'll be discussing virtual assets with Andy Carpenter of OJ Regulatory Consulting. Welcome, Andy. How is life in the Channel Islands today?
Good morning, Cayman. Good afternoon, Jersey. Everything is great here. The sun's out. I've got a bit of a cold, unfortunately, so I apologise in advance if I start spluttering.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Okay, I'm just making sure my screen is sharing, and it is. Okay, so before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. As always, this webinar is not legal advice. It should last approximately 1 hour, and you are encouraged to post questions, and I'll do my best to present those to Andy at the end. Those who need certificates of attendance, those will be auto-generated for attendees of the live broadcast only, and you will receive that in an email approximately 1 hour after the broadcast ends. And also, I wanted to, we do have a few polling questions so that Andy and I can get a feel for our audience's knowledge of virtual assets and virtual asset service providers. So I'll be showing those as well. But before the polls, I thought I'd provide a few examples of virtual asset service providers. And I generated this list with the help of ChatGPT, by the way. So this is all ChatGPT's doing. So it might be a little bit out of date because I understand that its knowledge ends as of September 2021, which in today's environment is outdated a little bit. But I thought this might come in handy for some of you who are very new to the virtual asset world, including myself. But this kind of broke it down as far as like there's cryptocurrency exchanges, wallet providers, payment processors, crypto ATMs. I live out in the middle of the country in Arkansas, and there is a crypto ATM and a gas station at this tiny little town of 5,000, believe it or not. So it's not just for the big cities. I don't know if anybody else sees those ATMs anywhere. So there's also some peer-to-peer exchanges. And the list went on. I mean, there was like 10 different, examples provided. Again, decentralized exchanges, token issuers, and more. So this is just put into the slides so that those of you who are very new, you can kind of get familiar with this. Oh, I also wanted to point out there are 2 handouts. I have actually been able to post today's slides in the handouts, so you don't necessarily have to keep emailing my team for them, but of course you can as well if you're listening to this after the live broadcast. There is a way you can email and get the copy of the slides, but they are in the handouts. And there is also another little quick article that it's not even really an article, it's just kind of some basic information about decentralized financing, which is very new to me. So I had to kind of look it up and do some research as well before today's broadcast. So we'll start with the polls now. I do have 3. Tom, if you don't mind launching the very first poll, which is how familiar are you with virtual assets? Tom, have you launched that? I think you have. Okay, great. Okay, yeah, so we're looking good here. We have about 40% of you are saying that you are moderately knowledgeable, 43%, another 40% are saying not very knowledgeable. Only 3% are saying you're very knowledgeable, so that's great. We do have some experts here, Andy. I should have one of them host this because this is a very new topic for me. And 10% of you are saying you are not at all knowledgeable. Okay, so that's great. Do you want to go ahead and close that and share the results? So yes, we've got an even split really between the moderately knowledgeable and the not very knowledgeable. So thank you very much. And I hope that kind of helps you, Andy, as well as you're doing the presentation. So let's go on to the next question. And so we have over 800 people registered for today's webinar. And I was looking at some of the companies, where the people are from. So first of all, the countries, everywhere from Lithuania, South Africa, Turks and Caicos, Malta, Pakistan, the US, the UAE, Ireland, India, Cayman. We have people from all over. I think it was like over 80 different countries. So again, as always, it's a very hot topic. The FATF has passed their requirements that virtual asset providers need to be service providers need to be regulated. So countries are adjusting all over the world to that requirement. It's I think it's called the recommendation 15, and there is a note on recommendation 15. So for those of you, 90% of you are saying no. So most of you do not work for virtual asset providers. 5% are saying you work at an exchange or a wallet provider. 2% at a payment processor. 5% are saying other. Yes, that you do work at another one. 0% at a virtual asset investment company. So yeah, we can go ahead and close that, Tom, and launch that so people can see their fellow attendees where they're at. But so yeah, so over 80% are saying no, you do not. So, and I did look at some of the companies, it's things like trust and company service providers, Andy. We even have some regulators. Welcome to the regulators as well, who are here. I know we're all trying to wrap our head around this. So, it's not just compliance officers. And I noticed too,
Sure.
we had a wide range of roles, Andy, from junior analyst to CEOs and managing directors. So again, welcome to everybody, whether you're a newbie to compliance, or you're trying to manage your business and you've got your compliance issues. And our third question: have you heard of blockchain analytics? And if I had to answer this, it would be no. I have not heard of blockchain analytics. I heard the term, but would not know anything about it. And Andy, that is what you are kind of here for, is to help us understand the blockchain analytics, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not someone who sells blockchain analytics software, but I'm someone who uses and has historically used it as part of investigations into virtual assets.
Okay.
So I'm not coming at blockchain analytics from a commercial point of view of software selling or anything. I'm just here to sort of share my experiences with it and to sort of explain how it's useful.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody appreciates that. Okay, so yeah, 28% are saying they have never heard of blockchain analytics. 51% they've heard of it, but not very knowledgeable. 14% some knowledge, and 8% are saying they are familiar with it. So that might be some of your co-investigators. So yeah, so
Yeah,
Tom, if you want to go ahead and close that, and we will continue on. So let me navigate around here. Sorry, my screen's. So again, today we have Andy Carpenter, based in Jersey, Channel Islands, of OJ Regulatory Consulting. Again, welcome, Andy. And you have a very impressive bio, and including, as we were just talking about, you have done you're an expert witness.
yes,
Any interesting, and of course that was really good for me to see, because that meant that you have to explain virtual assets and blockchain and all. You have to explain that to a jury, correct? Who
that's
might not have
correct.
any
Yes.
familiar. Yeah. Okay.
That's right. So you're trying to explain complex technical stuff to lay people, and you just have to hope that they understand in the time you've got, and you look for nodding heads in the jury, which sort of acknowledges the fact that they do understand what you're talking about. So it's a challenge.
Okay. Great. Fantastic. And how did you get into this space? Because you're
So
more of an investigator, correct? You kind of do the investigation.
yes, well, I used to be more of an investigator. I started off in law enforcement in the UK 20 years plus ago as a detective, and then I got into digital forensics and joined a digital forensics firm over in the UK. So I spent 20 years in both public sector law enforcement and private sector consultancy firms around digital forensics. I then moved over to Jersey from the UK and joined the States of Jersey Police and joined their digital forensics team, and then moved on in sort of the infancy of virtual assets and cryptocurrency into the Joint Financial Crime Unit to do a lot of work around virtual assets and how they're being used both to pay for illicit goods and also how they're being used to launder funds as well.
Okay.
There's just a few extra bits on there. Then I went on to move for Shaw Telecoms Company from Joint Financial Crime Unit, which might seem like a strange move, but behind all the data and behind all the blockchain, you've got network providers. I wanted to look under the bonnet and sort of fill my knowledge around how they prevent against fraud and what sort of data sets you can use to detect money laundering.
Okay, that's a pretty interesting career, I have to admit. That's been all over a little bit, so
Yeah,
that's great. Okay. Well, listen, I'm going to let you kind of do your thing and present.
sure.
I will try not to only if I'm like really lost will I kind of butt in maybe with one of my own questions. For the audience, we will be taking questions. There is a question box, so just go ahead and post those questions. And at the end of those, I will be presenting those to Andy. I believe we have just over 200, maybe 300 people listening in to the, oh no, over 400 people listening in. So I might not be able to get to all of them, but do please post your questions. And then even those that, we can't get to, I will present to Andy afterwards so that maybe we can try and answer those in any kind of post follow-up email. So Andy, I will just go ahead and let you go and just let me know if I'm moving too fast on the slides or if you want me to move on to the next one.
Cheers, Kimberly. And sort of as you were referring to earlier, and as the poll showed, we've got a very mixed group of people out there who are listening today. And with the questions and answers, everyone should feel safe to ask a question. We're all learning. Virtual assets are evolving. Their global adoption is coming around the corner, but everyone is still learning in this arena. So everyone should feel free to ask a question. There's no such thing as a silly question, and no one should feel that I don't know enough to ask a question. You should. I'm looking forward to questions at the end, but
Yeah,
don't be
I'm
afraid to ask a question
definitely,
on the
yeah,
subject.
I can definitely agree with that. I had to do a lot of research and I'm still kind of, like I said, it's yeah, I'm still very lost. So I'm glad you're here and encouraging the questions. Thank you.
Brilliant, no worries. Okay, so today we are going to talk about blockchain analytics, open source intelligence, virtual assets, and anti-money laundering compliance. The three topics that I sort of deal with on a daily basis, and we're going to break them down into more detail. So the question really is, what are blockchain analytics? So the blockchain, some of you may know, I'm going to treat everyone as if it's sort of the first time hearing about it. So the blockchain is publicly available ledger of all historical transactions that have taken place involving a certain virtual asset. So Bitcoin, which a virtual asset, will have its own blockchain, and Ethereum will have its own blockchain. And these are transparent ledgers showing all the transactions involving that specific virtual asset. So if we just go on to the next slide. So I was saying blockchain is publicly available and transparent ledger of all historical transactions. And I've got a little diagram here really to illustrate how things take place on the blockchain. And the blockchain is freely available to view for Bitcoin. There's a website, www.blockchain.com, where if you access that website, you can see the blockchain in real time, and you can see the transactions that have taken place. You can put in wallet addresses, which I'll get on to a second. And yeah, you can see the ledgers of transactions involving the virtual assets. Okay, so what I've got if we just go back one slide, sorry. Go to the previous slide. Great. So just to give you an example, we've got a string of 3 transactions illustrated here. So virtual assets are held in what are called wallet addresses. And so the first wallet image we've got with a Bitcoin poking out the top. Above it is the wallet address for this wallet that starts 1F1. And what we can see in sort of the flow of transactions is that 97.2 Bitcoin was sent to the second wallet, which starts with the numbers 18 and then JB. And we can see the date and time of this transaction, 11:30 and the 6th of the 6th, 2023. And all this information is recorded in the transaction information in the blockchain ledger. But that is all you will see. You will just see the wallet addresses involved in a transaction, the date and time of the transaction, and how many virtual assets were sent as part of that transaction. And then we can see the passing on of, but there's a second transaction from this middle wallet to the wallet on the right that starts 19A, Again, at 97.2 bitcoins were sent, but later in the day at 1615 on the it's on the 8th of the 6th. And all this information is stored in the blockchain ledger, and you can view it if you went to www.blockchain.com. You can view all of these transactions. But as I say, that's all you get to see. And as it appears, they're anonymous transactions, and that puts them potentially as a tool for money launderers. There's no information in there about who is controlling these wallet addresses. And we've spoken briefly in one of the polls about virtual asset exchanges. And they can be used, unfortunately, to potentially launder some of these funds just through use of the wallet addresses. So you don't get details of the people behind the wallets or the financial institutions involved in the transaction that you would traditionally see in traditional currency transactions, and therefore they pose an AML risk. So virtual assets can be bought from virtual asset exchanges, whereby you send them your traditional currency in dollars and pounds, and they will convert it to virtual assets. And from there, you can either send these virtual assets to a wallet address of your choosing, or you can choose another wallet address for them to be. You could use them to pay for goods, etc. And some of these virtual asset exchanges have better AML, client due diligence and KYC systems in place. If we look at Coinbase, one of the oldest virtual asset exchanges, they have very sufficient AML, CDD, KYC systems in place, whereas exchanges such as Bitslato had no KYC systems in place at all, therefore very high risk. Okay. So yeah, blockchain analysis is the application of available intelligence over the top of these transactions that are recorded in the blockchain ledger. And it makes it possible to identify if a wallet has transacted with virtual asset exchanges operating from locations with no or poor AML regulations, they're linked, the wallet address is linked to criminal activity, or connected to the funding of terrorism or sanctioned entities. And where does blockchain analysis software, where does it get its intelligence from to lay over the blockchain transactions? So the intelligence can come from various sources. We've got a publication here on the right that is from the FBI, and it's a list of wallet addresses that were used by the Lazarus Group, who are a group of North Korean hackers who hacked a virtual assets exchange, stole a load of virtual assets, and routed the stolen assets through a string of wallet addresses before attempting to cash them out. And basically, this is what the blockchain analytics software is crawling through across the internet, looking for similar publications to that one. And the source doesn't just come from FBI publications and law enforcement publications. There are a lot of scams that are going on whereby people will send emails to members of the public claiming to have access to the webcam of their devices and say they've recorded them doing things, and will attempt to get them to pay a ransom to delete that recording. And at the bottom of the email is a wallet address, and the blockchain analytics software is also taking in and sort of harvesting these wallet addresses as well to add them to their list of wallet addresses that should be flagged as part of the blockchain analysis process. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so FATF enhanced due diligence. FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force, has put virtual assets as requiring enhanced due diligence due to there being a higher risk. And the Financial Action Task Force is global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog, and sets the international standards to prevent global money laundering and terrorist financing, just in case no one's heard of them before. They help make policy, and they work to generate necessary political will to bring around legislative and regulatory reforms in these areas. That's a mouthful. And in total, more than 200 countries and jurisdictions have committed to implementing their standards, FATF standards, as part of coordinated global response to preventing organised crime, corruption and terrorism. And if you look at a lot of the regulators' publications around and guidance around virtual assets, that they will have plucked the guidance from FATF's publications. They're the driving force behind regulations around virtual assets. And traditionally, they were behind the AML standards regarding traditional finance and in traditional currency. Okay, and we've got listed here as part of enhanced due diligence with regards to virtual assets. We have got in these and other cases EDD measures that may mitigate the potentially higher risks associated with virtual assets. A, corroborating the identity information received from the customer that you have done with traditional finance anyway. B, potentially tracing the customer's IP address, which we will go into IP addresses shortly. The use of analysis products such as blockchain analytics, and searching the internet for corroborating activity information consistent with the customer and the customer's transaction profile. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. So I just touched upon the blockchain ledger. Again, it's publicly available. Anyone can view the blockchain with regards to certain virtual assets. So this is a snippet from the blockchain.com website I mentioned earlier. You can put a wallet address in at the top here. And it is an anonymous wallet address. It's not like an IBAN number where you could break it down to identify which country and which banking institution the wallet address belonged to. So we put into the search field at the top this wallet address starting BC1, and it's showing us a transaction at the bottom in the small sort of circle area. It shows you the date and time of the transaction. And that's it, that one there. On the right, to the right of that, it's not actually circled, but it shows you 3.0681 Bitcoin that were used as part of this transaction that was sent, which at the time had a value of $66,000, just over. And underneath, that's highlighted in the big circle, it's showing the transaction taking place whereby Bitcoin was sent from wallet beginning BC1QS to the wallet that we have put in the search field at the top starting BCFQ2. And we can see that that wallet received 3.06, I think it's 81 Bitcoin. So we've got the date and time of the transaction, we've got the wallet addresses involved, but that is it. And if, let's say, you go to blockchain.com, it will show you the blockchains, it will show you the list of the transactions, and you won't see anything more than this. So there's a lot of anonymity involved in the ledger.
A
Go to the
quick
next slide.
question, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
of course.
On these, so I went to blockchain.com, and it's my understanding that you kind of have to create an account, but to do all this, I would not necessarily have to be buying and selling blockchain. Is that correct? Or I
No,
just have
that's
to
correct.
create an account? Okay.
No, you're just viewing the ledger of transactions. You're not actually involving yourself in carrying out a transaction yourself.
Okay. Okay. And the other question I had is this particular one just for Bitcoin, or is this for
Yes.
all of the different coins? Okay, so if I needed to go check the activity of another, like Ethereum, is there another kind of ledger that
I
I
see.
go to?
So no, this website has a number of blockchain actual illustrations on it. So at the bottom left,
Okay.
we can see Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin Cash. What you would typically do is you would put a
Okay.
wallet address into that search field at the top, and when you clicked on the magnifying glass to search, it would identify whether or not it was a Bitcoin wallet address, an Ethereum wallet address. It would give you options as to which ledger you wanted to look at. So
Okay.
it's a very, very useful website for viewing the blockchain for various virtual assets.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to look at blockchain analytics and risk reporting. So are all blockchain analytics tools doing the same thing? To an extent, they are. There are different tools, different blockchain analytics software, but they have slightly different outputs. Most of them revolve around risk scoring of wallet addresses and virtual asset exchanges. Basically there's a limited amount of blockchain analytics service providers. And it's not that just anyone can go in and use blockchain analytics. You need a certain skill set, a certain mindset in order to be able to interpret the results that they produce. So it's not that someone could just purchase one of these and think, right, I'll put a wallet address in and it'll tell me everything I need to know. You need to, when you actually purchase one, they come with a certain amount of intelligence in there and a certain amount of risk rating already configured into the software. But you need to configure the blockchain analytics software with all key elements of risk to sufficiently support the appropriate scoring. So, for example, if you didn't want to engage with someone who had a wallet address that had been involved with any virtual asset exchanges in Africa, you could tweak the scoring of the blockchain analytics software. So if there was any connection to virtual asset exchanges in Africa, it would give it an increased risk score. So yeah, this should all be identified, monitored, and captured through your company's business risk assessment process.
Okay.
Okay,
Quick question again
yeah,
on my part and are these three different products? Would you be able
they
to give
are.
us the name at the end,
Yeah.
or like I
Okay,
can put them in
so
the email at the end?
yeah, we can put them in an email at the end, but to give you the names of a few, there's Chainalysis, which is the oldest uh, blockchain analytics provider. There's Elliptic, there's Anchain, and there's TRM Labs as well. And they, as well as providing blockchain analytics software, they also provide some decent training packages as well to go along with them. So
Okay.
what we've got here are three examples. On the far left, we had one which shows you the risk score, but it also will evidence why it gives you a certain risk score. So it could be that there have been suspicious transactions involving that wallet address. The middle one, the blue one, is showing that this wallet address has been involved potentially in a scam, and it's also sent virtual assets to what's called a mixer. And a mixer basically is a service that's provided that you send them your virtual assets, and it's almost like a laundering system for virtual assets. They will then send out clean virtual assets to wallet address of your choosing. So because this wallet address that we put into the software has shown that there's been all this interaction with mixer wallets, it's given it a very high risk score of 95 because there are very few legitimate reasons for using a mixing service. And on the far right, we've got the results of a wallet address search, score of 100, because it would have been a wallet address that when some ransomware was sent, like in the email that I showed, that they have got the wallet address from an email where that wallet address was listed in the ransomware email.
Okay,
So that's
fantastic. And
three
does
different.
the user who's using these tools, do they have to kind of do some configuration on their side, or is it just saying,
Yeah,
hey, this is what, okay, so that's why you
yeah,
said there, you need to have a little bit of experience there. Is,
absolutely. It'll get you that when it comes out of the box, it'll probably get you 50% of the way there, but the other 50% is up to you and your company's sort of business risk assessment as to who you're going to deal with.
okay. And is that what you kind of, you help do with your consulting? Are you
Yes,
kind of
that's right.
helping? Okay,
Yeah, we can
fantastic.
help with sort of the implementation of blockchain analytics if a company is looking to get into some exposure regarding virtual assets and the
Mhm.
onboarding of virtual assets, then we can help support them in setting themselves up.
Okay, good to know we're not alone. We have to
Mhm.
figure this out ourselves.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. So what we've also got here is another output from blockchain analytics software platform. This one's Anchain. And you would put in your wallet address that, say you're onboarding a customer and you're asking them about their virtual assets, where they keep them, and they give you a wallet address, you put it in, and this is one of the outputs that you get, and it shows, working from the left, you've got this orange flow of virtual assets through the little icons which are wallet addresses, and all of a sudden they get to a wallet address in the middle where it suddenly springs out, leaves out into many branches, and that will have been the wallet address that you put into the analytics software. And what is then showing is where the virtual assets from within the wallet address that you've been provided details of, where have those virtual assets gone historically? And we can see some orange flows to what look like temple icons on the right, and some of the temple icons are orange and some are green. And these are virtual asset service providers, these temple icons. And if they are orange, they have been rated as high risk, either operating in high risk jurisdictions, i.e. jurisdictions where there's no virtual asset regulation, no AML regulation, no sort of KYC required. And the green temple icons are virtual asset service providers where they're operating in jurisdictions that have good regulation in place, and that the virtual asset exchange itself has been risk rated and shown as being low risk. So this is sort of a similar output, other than just the risk scoring of wallet addresses. You get to look at, because the transactions on the blockchain are visible, this software can get in there and see where funds have come from and gone to, and you can make an assessment of your customer's wallet address and what it's been involved in. Okay,
That
so
was
we're going
very
to move on.
helpful, actually. I can remember
No
looking at
worries.
those slides when you sent them, and I was so lost. So you
Wondering why
did,
there are temples. What are the
yeah,
temples? Yeah, they're the
exactly.
virtual asset exchanges and
Yes,
service
exactly.
providers.
So I guess virtual asset service providers are going to be our new churches. Is that what you're trying to hint at?
Oh dear. But yeah, certainly there's going to be more and more of them appearing, and they're all going to need sort of risk rating. But when we talk about virtual asset service providers, just to spend 1 minute on that. So we're talking about either exchanges where you can send them your virtual assets and they will change them into virtual assets. If you send them your traditional currency, they turn them into virtual assets. Or they may be people who are companies that will store your virtual assets on your behalf, custodian services. So say you bought 100 Bitcoin 5 years ago and you want to keep it in somewhere really safe, then the custodian service providers will help you with that. But they are a virtual asset service provider. So those temples, they're not just exchanges, they're also custodian service providers as well.
Okay.
Just to expand upon that a little bit. But we're gonna move on to open source intelligence, and a number of you might already be aware of open source intelligence or already using open source intelligence sources as part of your onboarding process. Okay, so onboarding, sort of the FATF enhanced due diligence that we've gone into before. It talks about using other information sources to confirm your customer is who they say they are. And really, it's a vast network of tools available for open source intelligence. There's a framework here on the left, and it shows that you can have, if you know where to look, you can have access to tools that will help you with social media accounts, delving into those. Things like we're talking about LinkedIn. You could go, that is an open source, a bit forum for open source intelligence. If, for example, you're onboarding someone who's claiming to be the CEO of a company, you could go onto LinkedIn, confirm they've given you their name and their company. And if they've got their profile in there, but they, for example, have got very few connections, which you wouldn't expect for a CEO, you expect them to be, networking to be a priority for them, and very little about their background, it may increase the risk associated with that individual. So OSINT research complements the traditional onboarding processes typically carried out by firms. And the blockchain analytics software itself pulls information from open source data sources as well as the sort of media screening that we were looking at earlier. I want us to show sort of an example on the right here of just an open source intelligence tool and how it can be used. On the right is a Wikipedia entry for Elizabeth Holmes, you may have heard of. She was running a company called Theranos, which claimed to have invented a device that could detect all sorts of diseases and illnesses in a sort of single drop of blood. And a lot of investors threw money towards her company, but she knew that it didn't work and exaggerated what it could do. And as a result, she was charged with deceiving investors in a massive fraud and sentenced to 11 years in jail. Now, that is what the Wikipedia entry looks like for now. But if we go on to the next page, I'm going to show you that there's a tool available. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. It's called a Wayback Machine, and it can be found at that web address there, www.archive.org/web. So if someone came to you and said, "Oh, I can't believe you had Elizabeth Holmes as a customer. Why would you have had her on your books?" Hopefully at the time when you did onboard her, you would have recorded all the information that you found out about her. But if you wanted to go back and see what information there was available about her back at the time you onboarded her, you could copy the web address for that Wikipedia entry. You could paste it into the Wayback Machine, and it would give you a calendar sort of interface as you see on the top right here. And the blue dots on the dates in February, they indicate a date when the Wikipedia page was changed or the website entry was changed. And that sort of bar chart above the blue dots there, that's it where you're indicating. That indicates years and months, the amount of changes that were made to a web page, such as Wikipedia. So you could click on one of the blue dots and it would take you on one of the dates, and it would take you to what the Wikipedia entry looked like on that specific date. So it'd be a good idea if you are onboarding a customer, because people, can change their Wikipedia pages to look how they want. And if someone is a criminal and Wikipedia said they were a criminal, but they knew they wanted to become a customer of your company, they could go in the day before you do your onboarding and change it all to make it look as if they had no criminal past on that front. So it's a good idea to use a tool like this to do a sort of a spread of research on an individual. If they are like a Wikipedia-based celebrity, you can use a tool like this really to go in and just look at the history of an individual and of the internet content available about them. So it's just an example of one of the OSINT tools that you could use.
Okay. I did not know that. That's very interesting.
Okay, so we're going to quickly and going to dip into the dark web. Okay, so the dark web, people think, oh, it's got to be illegal. I shouldn't go anywhere near it, and it's not illegal to go onto the dark web to carry out investigations. But obviously, attempting to purchase illegal items from it is that's what goes without saying. And this lines up with FATF, the ECDD guidance around searching the internet for corroborating activity around an individual, and it's all part of the onboarding process. And it used to be quite difficult to access the dark web, but these days you can just Google the word Tor, T-O-R, Tor browser, and there's a link that will now show you how to download the browser. And it's an internet browser like Firefox or Google Chrome, but it's got an emphasis on anonymity, and it allows you to view certain websites that you wouldn't be able to typically access using the likes of Google Chrome or Firefox. And using Tor makes it more difficult to trace a user's internet activity, and it protects a lot of the personal privacy information and protects people from network surveillance. And there are a number of marketplaces on the dark web that you can access using the Tor browser, and they're found to be offering either fake ID documents or stolen official documentation that has been tampered with. And it's possible to compare customer supplied IDs such as passport numbers with those on the advertised documents that are available on the dark web. Again, it's part of your onboarding and your ECDD.
Okay. Just so you know, whenever I was again reviewing your slides, so I have our head of IT, he's cybersecurity trained,
Hmm.
and when I was like, well, can I, you know, what does this Tor mean? And he told me it's the onion router. Is
Yes,
is that
that's right.
correct? Yeah. So that's the
Yeah,
reason why they have the onion. It's called the onion router. It's the reason why it's called Tor.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, I can get in there, and he was like, don't you dare. And so
yeah.
he's like,
That's it.
yeah. So I do recommend leaving this to the experts, or getting some good training, because apparently
Yeah,
there is some
absolutely.
dangers, and it's like going down a dark alley at night,
Yeah,
so
and but
he
it's definitely
banned me
useful to.
from it.
Yeah, it's very useful to have someone within your sort of screening and onboarding unit who has knowledge of open source and sort of the dark web. And we in the police force used to have because obviously everything is networked up, but we would have a standalone computer connected to the public internet, not through any of our systems at all. And that would be something that we'd use that computer to access the dark web, really just so it didn't sort of send off any alerts or alarms in the police's system. So it may be another way that we can either help people if they do need to set some system up like that, or we're able to do some research for them ourselves if they're looking at an individual that they want to carry out ECDD measures on. We can help support in those instances.
Yeah, yeah, because yeah, I definitely do not recommend, and I think Wes would not recommend like a junior analyst trying to learn more about this going into the dark web. Get some proper training,
Yeah,
and
100%.
as you say, get a different system that is not attached to your network.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 'cause I
But
was
the
about ready to do it just straight from my desktop. He's like, "Don't you dare!" He knows me too well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a skill set though moving forward, that people are going to need to know, certainly have awareness of these things. And although they might not need to use them themselves for their workplace, it's good to have someone that if they do need to do any kind of work, has the working knowledge of how to access it.
Yeah, I guess kind of in a way it makes sense. I mean, if compliance people are trying to make sure they're not, onboarding the bad guy,
Yeah,
you kind of have to go where the bad guys are to see if they're out there,
yeah,
see if they are in those dark alleys. But at the same time, you
exactly.
don't want to send somebody who doesn't have the street smarts
No,
into those
exactly.
dark alleys. That's the only way
That's
I
where you
can
need
kind
the
of
training.
explain it. Yeah,
Sure,
exactly. I can
sure.
see that.
So we're
Okay.
moving back from the dark web back to the traditional internet, and we're going to look at another open source intelligence tool that you can look at. So if someone's provided you with photographic documentation of who they are, there's another tool you can use called PimEyes. It's at pimeyes.com. You upload the photo that you've got, and it will tell you whereabouts on the internet this picture has appeared before, and will give you links to the web pages where it's appeared before. So it's just to show that there are a number of OSINT tools publicly available, just using the regular internet. That's just another example.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move on to other information that your customer may have provided you with as part of the onboarding process, and what you can do to sort of review what they provided you with as part of your ECDD. So anyone could, this what we've got here, the website is called Have I Been Pawned, www Have I Been Pawned. And what it has done is it's collated information regarding to data breaches where huge amounts of email addresses and passwords were compromised. There was a massive one in 2019. I think we're talking a billion records, and I think it's about 500 million in the second, in the other exploit sort of listed behind here in 2016. So that's where people's work email addresses and their passwords were compromised, and history of passwords as well. So if someone's provided you with an email address as part of your interaction with them, anyone can set up a free Gmail or Outlook email account, but you'd be suspicious of a client, potentially suspicious of a client using those, using a free email account, and expect them instead to use a company email address or an email address that you would pay for. And millions of the business email addresses and passwords have been compromised in these hacks. And if you enter the email address that you've been provided with into Have I Been Pawned, it'll allow you to check if your customer's supplied email address could have been bought on the dark web by a fraudster or a money launderer, because it's been compromised in one of these hacks that we're sort of showing here. So it's just another open source intelligence tool that you can use to analyze the information your customers provided you with.
Okay. Now, I did actually put my email in there, and of course, there's been several hacks in the past, but I was looking through them, and I was like, well, these are all just like little apps and stuff like that. So how? I mean, because to me, it seems like almost every email's been pawned at some point. There's been some kind of data breach. So just because somebody's email has been pawned, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not the person you're talking to.
No,
I
it's
mean, how would you go about if you did find somebody's email in this?
well, if it's not just email addresses you go on when you're onboarding. There's a source of information they'll have to provide you with, but in some instances, you'll actually contact people about their email address that's been compromised, and it's the first they will have heard of it. So they're kind of grateful sometimes to hear that
Oh,
they,
okay.
they found out about their email being compromised. But
Well,
it's
this is a
just
good tool too, just to put your email in, just to to check, because you'll get a notification.
yeah,
Is that right? Is that
yeah,
the okay? Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
and it will
yeah.
show
That's the
you
reason why
where
I knew mine were. Yeah.
yeah, it'll show you where your information was compromised as well historically.
Okay.
Okay, so on the next one, we're going to quickly go on to what IP address tracing is. So the IP address is a number allocated to your computer or phone on a specific network, be it Wi-Fi or corporate wired network. So if you if you're viewing this at the moment, your computer has got and the network it's on has got an IP address, and that IP address is sent as part of correspondence, be it email addresses, emails that are sent, or when you log into a company's interface. So if you're asked to put your email and password in to access a website, they will keep a log of the IP address that you've been accessing it from. So you can put the IP address into a website such as this, www.ipapi.com, and it will show you where in the world the network that you're accessing the internet from, where in the world it is. And it'll show you more than just that, because at the bottom here, we've got the IP address on the left. On the right, highlighted in the red box in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got
Mm.
where it says org. That shows you the telecoms network provider that the IP address has been issued by. So you can Google that and it'll show you sort of which country it's in. But it'll also show you whether or not your customer is using what they call a VPN, which is a virtual private network. Instead of having a telecoms provider in there, it will have a software provider, a VPN software provider's details in there. And you have to ask yourself then, well, why are they using a VPN to disguise where they're from or pretending to be from somewhere they're not? So it's just another sort of flag on your systems. And if you
Okay.
suspected they were legitimate, then you can say, can you turn off your VPN and provide me with your IP address so I can just check you are operating from where you say you are.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask is, like, I had to find out my IP address, and we do use a VPN on a fairly
Yeah,
regular basis, again, for security purposes. So
yeah,
it's not unusual to use a VPN,
yeah.
but as you say, you can turn it off and then do the check when they do turn it off. Um, but you are having to, as a compliance person, I am having to ask them for their IP address, correct?
Yeah, as part of your onboarding process, it's not unfamiliar to ask them for their IP address, and they can, if they're just unaware of what it is, you can get them to direct them to a website such as
Yeah.
whatismyipaddress.com, and that will provide you on the screen there and then with what your actual IP address is. So then
Okay.
you, as the receiver of that information, can carry out this research.
Okay.
Okay, so this sort of, we talk back onto the onboarding tools here and links back to the FATF ECDD side of things to make sure you've got appropriate tools to enable completion of full due diligence and assessment of all the risks. That's what we're sort of using OSINT for here, to confirm ID hasn't been compromised on the dark web, to confirm that the email address hasn't been supplied, hasn't been compromised. The IP address and mobile phone networks match the supplied country of residence and not originating from sanctioned countries. And you can also use blockchain analytics to risk rate the wallet addresses and virtual assets, source of wealth, source of funds in connection with your client, your customer. Okay, so we're going to swiftly move on to virtual assets, transaction monitoring, data analysis to identify money laundering, terrorism finance and proliferation financing. If we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so you need to review the method and process used by firms to accept virtual assets, and virtual asset service providers to sort of monitor and screen virtual assets that are sent to their platform. So if you are going to accept virtual assets as a form of payment, you would have your wallet address and you'd ask your customer to send their virtual assets. You would screen you would ask them, what is your wallet address, and you would screen it using your blockchain analytics software. And if it came back as clear, then you say, right, send your virtual assets to my wallet address, and you'd have what you'd call like a landing or screening wallet that you provide them with the address to. They would forward their virtual assets to you, and it's impossible to stop someone. Not everyone knows this fact that if someone sends virtual assets to your wallet address, you can't stop them doing that. There's no way to stop that. But if they have, you're waiting for these virtual assets to be sent by your customer, and when you review the virtual assets that have been sent to you, you realize that they have been sent from a different wallet address than the one that they said they were going to send them from. You can then hold them in this landing wallet, and you can screen them. And if it comes back as potentially they're from a high risk wallet address, that's obviously a flag for yourself. And we're looking at this point sort of submission of a suspicious activity report to your local financial intelligence unit. So you would go to them, to the FIU, you would hold the virtual assets in that wallet address and await guidance from the FIU on whether or not to, what you should be doing with these virtual assets, whether to release them, retain them. You get advice off them at that point. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. Okay, so some virtual asset service providers, we're back to the temples here. Some virtual asset service providers are operating from locations that require a license, have a regulator or regulations in place, and they're the green ones listed here. And some aren't, and as we sort of drifted upon before, they're more risky. But the blockchain intelligence tools, they're constantly updating their intelligence to identify and risk rate virtual asset service providers, including those exchanges and custodians. And they carry out the review of customers' wallet addresses and transactional interactions with the exchanges to assist with the risk rating of customers. So when it comes to your transaction monitoring, you can do periodic reviewing of the wallet address you've been provided with details of. So rather than do it just at onboarding, you could say, right, every 2 weeks I'm going to go and enter this wallet address into our software and look at the transactions involving that wallet address as part of your sort of ongoing reviewing and risk rating. Okay, and now we're on to sort of data analysis to identify money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing. So beneath every company is an IT department and IT systems that will store a lot of information in their data warehouses or data pools, as they're called. And really, compliance need to have a decent relationship with their IT department, because you're going to be setting up alerts based around a lot of this data that's stored in the IT systems. And this data is generated either by the employees' use of the systems, but it's also by the customers' use of their systems during interactions with a firm, through either emails or sending of files, or as I said before, when they log into the platform using their email address and password. So the data warehouse is the source data that you configure and set alerts against with the assistance of your IT teams. It'll include other details about customers resetting passwords, contact information, etc., and the IP addresses we've spoken about before. So you can look at the data, analyze the data to identify anomalies and remove any uncertainty through examination of various data sets. So the wallet addresses, IP addresses, again, reviewing and putting flags on IP addresses that potentially have come from sanctioned countries. You can look at the data in connection to the dark web again, email addresses, mobile phone numbers that are registered by your customer in your company's data. And are people changing the phone numbers, the mobile phone numbers regularly? Are people changing their passwords regularly? All of these should be flags to look at the account and try and ascertain why are people either forgetting their passwords, why is this activity taking place, and it should all be raising flags. And you can also look at device MAC addresses. So a device MAC address is specific to a handset or a tablet or a computer. And if there are multiple devices that are accessing your systems through, logging on using the email address and password, if it's just 2 or 3, not a problem. Most people have 2 or 3 devices. But if there's sort of 10 plus, then it could be an account that's being used by an organized crime group to launder funds, and then multiple individuals who've got access to that account.
Okay. Quick question, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I saw that the FATF had published a kind of a red flags of virtual assets. Have you had a chance to read that? And if so, is that pretty good reading? I mean, is that, or do you think it's kind of moved on from there?
No, it is still up to date. FATF have
Okay.
been quite on it with their publications recently around virtual assets. They've had another one recently, sort of giving feedback, and Moneyval did one as well around feedback around regulation of virtual assets, only in sort of the last couple of weeks. So it's a lot of stuff to read at the moment around virtual assets and controls that you could put in place, but still relevant reading around the flagging sort of side of things as well.
Okay. You said Moneyval just published one
Yes,
on red
Moneyval has
flags?
published, not on
Okay.
red flags so much as more virtual assets and risk associated with them, and what they're seeing
Okay.
around the regulators, and as to whether regulation is effective in various jurisdictions. But it's a good piece, a good report from them.
Okay. And for those of you who are asking about red flags, yeah, I did notice that the FATF had published one. I want to say it's like 15, 20 pages. It's not too
Yeah, that's
bad.
not too long. Yeah,
It's not the 120 pages that some of the reports usually are.
quite.
So yeah, you can just Google FATF virtual asset red flags, and that
Yeah,
document will come up. Okay.
quite. So going on to the next slide, it's really about, we've spoken about data warehouses and setting up your controls and alerts, but what happens, and one of the main problems is, one of the main things that sort of causes control failures, which would then end up with money laundering taking place, is that there's incorrect configuration on the alerts and on the reports. It may be that the system set up on, say, for example, an IP address monitoring, and it hasn't been quite configured properly, and it's not picking up IP addresses emanating from a sanctioned country. So there are no alerts being raised, or it's been set up and it's accidentally listed, say, Germany as a sanctioned country. So you're getting a lot of false positives on that front, a lot of alerts for IP addresses that aren't actually operating from sanctioned countries. Or it could be that it's not actually recording data and analyzing data properly. And these are things between your compliance teams and your IT teams you should be helping set up. But we can also support any company that needs assistance with setting up any of their controls around data. We can look at the data sets that you've got and how you could be utilizing them to best identify and prevent money laundering. One of the other problems that causes financial control failures is the lack of headcount and the capacity to really have enough people to handle the alerts that are raised. So some alerts may go for days or weeks without being addressed, or they may not get addressed at all. But we've got, I say, lots of experience within Azure Regulatory Consulting to help support firms that need help with any of the issues that are identified. And we've also got training gaps that are identified, so people might not know how to action the alerts that are raised.
Okay. And it's interesting that you bring that up because it's something that we talk about here as the kind of the kind of younger generation moves into compliance, how they are, as compliance has moved on from when I first started in compliance in 2004, 2005, and it is now so tech heavy. You really need to have people who understand the technologies, different technologies available,
Yeah.
and that is so critical. I mean, I would not be a good compliance officer for a virtual asset service provider.
Yeah.
It's just beyond my skill set. But somebody who's in their mid 20s, who has that technical knowledge, or who has come from like an information systems or computer science background, they would be fantastic in that role.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
you don't
really
have to look
important to
just
fill
for,
your
yeah, fill those gaps.
Yeah, exactly. You need to fill those gaps and surround yourself with a good sort of team knowledge. So within our team here, we've got a number of individuals I work with who are ex-regulatory from the local commission. So they teach me things regarding certain local legislation and regulations, and I've been sort of upskilling them in parts of virtual assets as well. So you can all learn off each other, and it's really good and important to get a team together and sort of tap into that team knowledge.
Yes, and it's also important because you see this a lot, or I see this often too, where people are they just kind of push anything tech related to their IT teams, but the IT teams might not have the compliance understanding, and so they really do need to work together. Um,
Yeah,
you know, in this kind of in this particular situation, especially. Great, thank you. And of
exactly.
course, as you said in your last point, the training gaps, making sure your
Yeah,
IT people are getting trained on the compliance.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. They're your friends. They're there to help you set up the alerts that you they're essential to you being providing sufficient uh, coverage across your team.
okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left. I've got some very good questions here. So the
Oh,
first
okay.
one is somebody has said open source verifications versus data protection. Does uploading a photo of a prospective client or customer on a public source tool not carry a risk from a data privacy perspective? And I think
Oh, okay.
they asked that one back when you were showing the photos. You're saying, is the photo kind of,
Ooh.
shared on the dark web? I mean, how
So,
do we protect that?
so we're talking about if an individual has sent you a photograph in of themselves and it is just a photo, there's no sort of addresses or names on the photo, and you're going to upload it to a system to see where that photo may have appeared before. So you'd ask yourself, that's a photo of an individual, and first of all, is there any other identification in regards to that image of an individual? There's nothing to say who they are. There's nothing to say where they're from. But you could ask permission from the person that you're looking to onboard. Say, look, I'm going to make some checks into the information that you provided me with, um, just to let you know. And if they suddenly come back saying, "Oh, please don't check my details out," then you've obviously got an alert there. But it's something that really, if you're going to carry out your enhanced due diligence to confirm that this individual is who they say they are,
Mhm.
it's down
When
to
would
your
they
own.
just send you a photo? I mean, because to
Well,
me, they'd be sending like a copy of a passport,
yeah. So you could
or an
snip that.
ID.
You could scan that passport and just snip the image of the individual out. So it's
Oh,
just the
okay.
image of the individual. No other passport information is sent. And then you could just upload the image of the individual's face without any other private information at all. So yeah, you certainly wouldn't want to be uploading a scan of a person's passport to one of these platforms, hosting
Okay.
platforms. You just cut out the image itself.
Okay. So again, more training needed, uh,
Yeah,
and awareness of the risk. Okay, that's
yeah,
great. Oh,
absolutely.
and for those asking for website addresses, I'll make sure that that gets put into the follow-up email, because we kind of listed quite a few there.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody is asking if you would comment on recommendation 16. Now, I read through recommendation 15,
Ooh,
and uh,
so we're
but
talking
not
travel
necessarily
rule.
16.
We're
Yes.
talking the
Should
travel rule.
that be a separate? Because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, the travel rule really needs to be its own separate
Hot topic.
webinar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And
I'll
I've
call you
spoken.
back. How's that?
Yeah,
For
yeah, it might
that.
take a couple of hours probably to go into that one. But yeah, it is a hot topic, and in fact, yeah, Moneyval is one of that Moneyval paper I was talking about is one of the key features of that is that people aren't putting the travel rule in place. It's a
Okay.
massive shortcoming in virtual assets world. So yeah,
Okay. Sorry, you. We'll have to do a separate broadcast on that particular topic.
sure.
Um, okay. And one of my so I understand that Dubai has their is the very first virtual asset regulatory authority, VARA, VARA. Have you become familiar
Yeah.
with their work? Okay. Yeah, I was
So
actually talking to somebody the other day, and they said they're just getting new guidelines every day from VARA. So they appear to be very on top of it, but it's everything's changing so fast that it's still hard for them to keep up. I guess
exactly.
my
Yeah.
question is for those jurisdictions who are looking to regulate virtual assets and virtual assets service providers and draft up these regulations first, do you recommend that they kind of look at VARA as a good example?
So VARA, as you say, most jurisdictions will have one regulator, but
Mhm.
VARA is one of two regulators in Dubai specializing in virtual assets, as you say. And Dubai is really pushing to get virtual asset service providers over there. You've got all sorts of handbooks, and it's trying to keep up globally with regulation is really hard because it's just changing so frequently. So it's you could look at if you want to get information on as to what's happening and what's good to follow. There's LinkedIn, from my point of view, is a very good source to look at publications from VARA, to look at what's out there. You know, if you want to absorb a lot of information around virtual asset regulations, get onto to LinkedIn and look at some of the publications from VARA, etc. It's the easiest way to quickly gain access to information, and obviously that improves your knowledge on the subject.
Okay. And it almost this just from this hour with you, it sounds like that might need to be the case that jurisdictions need to have a very specific, very well trained regulator who focuses on virtual assets. Would you agree, or do you think it can be done in one?
So I think the problem is that virtual assets are evolving each month, and there's different legislation, regulation coming in around the globe, and I think it's very hard for regulators to keep up with it all. Some are very welcoming to virtual asset service providers. Others are just like, no, we don't want anything to do with you. But I think finding staff to man the regulators with sufficient knowledge is a real problem.
It's a
And you,
challenge.
actually got, yeah, a massive challenge. You've got VARA, as you say, who they've only recently set up, and they're going to have to recruit heavily. Yeah, certainly for the regulators, I don't think there's any regulator out there saying that they have got too many staff to handle. They've got too many staff dealing with virtual assets. All of them have, I suspect, will have too few staff to deal with virtual assets.
Okay. I have another question. I've got a few. I'm still trying. I realize we're a little bit over, but I
Sure.
want this is so interesting. If you don't mind, I'd like to keep you on. Are you on a time
Yeah, no, that's fine. Absolutely.
limit? Okay. And I realize we might lose some of our audience, but I'll try and cover this too in an email. Somebody's asking, is there a legitimate reason for using a mixing service?
Um, Not one that I would know of, that I could ever, if someone came to me saying, "Oh, I use a mixing service," I would have to spend a good half hour with them to understand why on earth they would want to use that. Um, and it is an indicator, it's a risk indicator. So yeah, I would have to really listen to their case for as to why they would want to use a mixing service.
Okay.
So from my point of view, I can't. I've never met someone who has used one legitimately, shall we say, for a legitimate
Okay.
purpose.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still trying to go through some of these questions just because they're coming in a little bit fast and furious, and they're very some. I can tell some. There's somebody named Chris. He or she clearly knows. I'll try and read what they have posted. They
Right.
said mixers can be used for nefarious purposes, but how easy/difficult is it to track cryptos across different chains?
Ooh. Okay. So yeah, that is probably a bit highbrow for this discussion. Um,
Okay, sorry, Chris.
so yeah,
I
so
have
you
to
can.
reach out to Andy separately.
Yeah, you can, as I say, there's sort of 4 or 5 virtual asset, blockchain analytics providers out there, and they are evolving their software each week. And so you can do cross-chain investigations on some of them. but there's a limit to what they can do. But yeah, so as the challenges come forth, so the blockchain analytics providers do their best to deal with these challenges and provide better ways of investigating the flow of virtual assets. So yeah, cross-chain investigations, you can carry them out now. And also with regards to mixers, for example, I have seen successful investigations where they've tracked virtual assets through mixers. That has been done, but it's very hard to do. But it still can be done.
Okay. Somebody else says, can a company not accept a pending transaction if the FIAU or FIU concludes that the transaction is suspicious? So
So you can't, the transaction, for example, if you're going to receive virtual assets, you can't stop the virtual
you can't
assets
stop it.
coming
Okay,
to you.
you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so they will land in your wallet, and what will raise
There's
the
no
flag
denying
probably.
it. You can't just turn it, say, I don't want this, send it back.
No,
You can't do that.
exactly. But what will usually happen is, you will have said to the person, "Can you send us some virtual assets?" And where are you going to send them from? They'll give you their wallet address. You screen that wallet address using your blockchain analytics software, and if it comes back as as potentially being a dodgy wallet or a flagged wallet, then you potentially wouldn't accept the virtual asset. You'll say, "Don't send them to me. Thank you. We don't want your business." But if it was a clean wallet that they had advertised to you that they were going to send the funds from, but when it came to sending the funds, they sent them from a different wallet address that actually was flagged with your software, that's when you would hold on to the virtual assets, contact the FIU, and get advice on what to do with the virtual assets you received.
Okay. I've got two. We got time maybe for just two more. Somebody is asking, Andy, please comment on the suitability of Maltego for onboarding use. What's Maltego?
Maltego. Now, gosh, if we're talking about what I think Maltego is,
You're
I'm
Googling real fast, aren't you?
I am. No, it is what I thought it was useful. I haven't used Maltego in I'd say 8 years. So it's an investigation. It's almost like a dumping ground for your investigation data. You use it when you're carrying out an investigation, and you can put many different sources of digital uh, evidence into it to sort of show flowcharts between IDs of people, virtual assets, of home addresses, all sorts. It's blockchain analytics software is linked to just wallet addresses. Maltego is wallet addresses plus all sorts of different areas of data. It's huge. I say I haven't used it in a number of years, so I don't know what it's up to these days. But it certainly wasn't the best tool to go to for virtual assets because it wasn't specializing in blockchain analytics. It was just a full um, palette of intelligence, not just blockchain intelligence.
Okay. And one final question. Somebody says, I understand that Bitcoin ATMs are being used extensively for money laundering. Clients enter fake cell phone numbers and names. Are there any specific controls that can be used to prevent this?
So virtual asset ATMs over in England, the regulators really clamped down on them. Yeah, they can be used for money laundering. Why, in my eyes, why would you use a virtual assets ATM? Because with money laundering, virtual asset ATMs are the way of getting your currency converted from cash into virtual assets, and also from getting virtual assets transferred back out into cash. So they are key to that part, the money laundering system, with sort of placement and layering. So from my point of view, if I ruled the world, I wouldn't be allowing virtual asset ATMs to exist. I think they're a really high money laundering risk. So just from my point of view, we don't have any in Jersey. There are a few in the UK, but they're being shut down, most of them, or the regulators are all over them at the moment. So I don't know how they're operating in sort of Cayman and the States, but certainly I
Okay.
can only speak on what's happening locally.
Okay. And somebody one last one. There's somebody's asking, what's the service you refer to for further information? Is it BARD, B-A-R-D? Sorry, that's not even ringing a bell with me. Did you refer to something?
Bard.
Um,
I thought Bard was Google's AI system. I don't think I reference Bard.
Okay, yeah, that
I'm not
doesn't
sure
sound
why that's
familiar
not
to
gone.
me. Sorry, Joanne, I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Somebody also comments that they used Maltego as part of their OSINT training.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
uh, yeah, so it must still be. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know when they took it, but so it must still have
yeah,
some.
absolutely. It's a good
Jim.
place for collating. It's like having a whiteboard that you can just shove all the information you've found
Oh, okay.
all in one place, and then you can connect the dots between the information.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
Fantastic. Okay. So I've already had a couple people say yes, they want to hear you speak again on the travel rule, or somebody.
oh, okay.
If somebody, yeah. So I'd love to have you back, if you don't mind, to just to at least talk
No
about
problem.
that. And
Yeah.
you said it might take a couple of hours. Maybe we could do a special one because I know this is such a big deal for so many. I mean, it's across the across jurisdictions. And so for those of you who do. Uh, need some additional training. I've met Tui, I've met Lisa, I've met Georgia. Andy, I haven't met you in person, but thank you so much. This was very, very helpful.
No worries. You're very welcome.
Um, yeah, I learned a lot, and I think you've cleared up a lot for me. So that was, and I've had a few people already say yes, they really appreciate your time with us today. So
That's
we'll
okay.
we'll end here. Sorry for going over, everyone. We will end here. So we're taking August off on the webinars. We'll be back in September. We have another one on proliferation financing for the kind of a follow-up to that because we had the nuclear policy expert on proliferation financing because that's another big one, and that is actually how virtual assets are being used for the funding of terrorism as well as proliferation financing. It's how a lot of people are getting around the sanctions as well. And of course, as we all know, the world's a little scarier these days than it was, 10 years ago. So we do have to be kind of very much being aware of all this, whether you're new, whether you're a manager, CEO, managing director, or a newbie, or even experienced like myself, that the compliance world is just changing so quickly. So I look forward to having you. If anybody is interested in, again, we'll send out the slides, or the slides are attached. If you're just listening to the recording, you can request the slides from myself or Tom as well. And if you have any ideas for any other topics or guests, or you are interested in being a guest or a sponsor of AML Gray Matters, please do join us. Andy, thank you again. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Enjoy beautiful Jersey. I was there a few months ago and it's absolutely gorgeous, and I look
Oh,
forward
no worries.
to returning.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Okay.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
Cheers.
And
Bye.
bye, everyone. Thank you.
Anti-money laundering compliance and customer and vendor onboarding involves multiple processes that must be done correctly and by the right people in the most efficient way. The tasks include gathering customer and vendor ID and verification documents, screening against sanctions and politically exposed persons lists, analyzing any reputational risk, periodic monitoring to assess any changes and updating due diligence, and staff training on money laundering, terrorist financing, bribery and corruption awareness and risks, as well as keeping them up to date on your policies and procedures and new regulatory requirements. In addition to the onboarding processes being strictly followed and documented, management must have access to critical compliance metrics and information to steer the company through regulatory waters and mitigate customer and other risks. With Silo Compliance System, these obligations become much more efficient. With Silo, your staff can enter the customer's information and upload due diligence documents and any other documents that you require. Key information entered about your customer automatically calculates a risk score, a calculation using a risk-based approach determined by you at initial implementation of Silo. In addition, if you have screening enabled, when the customer's name is first entered into Silo, the name is checked against sanctions, politically exposed persons lists, and adverse media. You'll see results of screening immediately and can review any potential hits right away. And with screening enabled, your customers and vendors are continuously monitored for any sanctions advisories, helping you get ahead of any potential reputational risks. No company is too small to benefit from using Silo. Even if your onboarding processes seem under control today, If one key staff member becomes unavailable or there is any increase in your customer portfolio, compliance with strict onboarding and review processes can quickly overwhelm a small company and put you at risk. Plus, implementing Silo can reduce the need to hire additional staff to manage compliance obligations and reduce your risk of non-compliance regulatory penalties and continued inspections. No one goes through an inspection or audit with great ease, but several users have reported that their inspections went more smoothly and with Silo they had improved outcomes. Reach out to us today to schedule a demo of Silo.